To understand the structural mechanics of an ancient text, we have to pay attention to where the author forces us to slow down. This is a section of an ancient scroll representing the density of Genesis chapter 36. It sits directly in the middle of the foundational narrative of Jacob, the patriarch of Israel. Right at the height of Jacob's story, the narrative abruptly pauses. It dedicates 43 dense verses to a genealogical registry for Esau, the brother who sold his birthright and was exiled from the primary covenant. This layout shows the English translation of that chapter. Notice the methodical repetition of structural phrases like, "These are the generations," and the relentless cataloging of regional dukes. A modern reader typically treats this as skippable filler. The ancient Near Eastern author, however, utilized these genealogies as load-bearing structural pillars. Genesis 36 acts as a highly precise geopolitical map, detailing the exact power structure of Israel's bordering neighbor, Edom. This chapter functions as a deliberate literary closing of the ledger. It records the fulfillment of ancient prophecies before permanently shifting the focus away from common history and into a specific theological enclosure. This photographic view of a fertile agricultural valley represents the land of Canaan. This was the initial shared homeland of both Jacob and Esau. Genesis 36, verses 6 through 8, records a specific historical data point. Esau gathers his wives, his household, his cattle, and his accumulated wealth, and physically relocates away from his brother. The text identifies the migration as a response to practical agricultural pressures. The combined wealth, livestock, and physical footprint of the two brothers reached the carrying capacity of their shared territory. This map demonstrates that resource saturation. The finite grazing land and water max out, which pushes the migration southeast, away from Canaan. Tracking that movement, Esau establishes his operation in the distinct topographical region of Mount Seir. This image reveals the physical reality of Mount Seir. It is a rugged, mountainous desert landscape, an environmental contrast to Canaan that dictates the future of the Edomite nation. Here, the text establishes a definitive, lasting equation. Esau is Edom. The patriarch is permanently linked to this specific geographic territory. The economic split over resources served as the catalyst for transforming a localized family separation into a fixed international border. These ancient rock-hewn facades in Petra offer physical evidence of the complex civilization that grew from Esau's lineage in this territory. Verses 9 through 14 operate as an intelligence briefing. They outline for future Israelite readers exactly who controls the borders next door. This diagram maps the genealogy from the top down. It starts with Esau and splits into 3 primary branches based on his Canaanite wives, Adah, Beshemath, and Aholibamah. The tree expands to track the immediate sons born to these branches, establishing the primary lines of Eliphaz and Reuel. Within this data is a critical offshoot. From Eliphaz's concubine Timnah comes a son named Amalek. This single data point carries immense geopolitical weight. It establishes the historical origin of the Amalekites, a group that will become one of Israel's most persistent military adversaries.
In verses 15 through 19, the structural terminology changes. These descendants are no longer recorded as mere family members. The text reclassifies them as Elufim. This term, often translated as dukes, denotes tribal chiefs or military heads of thousands. The diagram reflects the shift. The record of biological descent transforms into a formal political organizational chart of sovereign dukes. Genesis 36 serves as proof that Esau engineered a structured, sovereign state directly on Israel's border. Beyond earthly political boundaries, this genealogy serves a deeper literary purpose. It validates prior narrative promises. The first major prophecy requiring fulfillment was the oracle given to Isaac's wife Rebekah before the brothers were born. The wording of Rebekah's oracle stated clearly, "2 nations are in thy womb." This layout maps the geopolitical data of Genesis 36 directly back to that oracle. It proves that Esau matured into a distinct, organized nation alongside Jacob. There is a second, much older promise at play, the foundational promise made by God to Abraham. The requirement of the Abrahamic promise was that he would be the father of many nations, plural, not exclusively the single line of Israel. The scale of the Edomite state connects directly to this requirement, confirming God's word was kept on a macro-historical level. Without this chapter of names, the foundational prophecies of the Torah would appear unfulfilled. The nation of Edom provides the historical receipts. Once these prophecies are proven fulfilled, we must ask a final structural question. What happens to Edom in the biblical text? The commentary explains this chapter's placement using a specific literary framework, the Enclosure. Outside of this enclosure lies the common history. This represents the secular geopolitics of surrounding nations and empires operating on the world stage. Inside the enclosure is the lineage of Jacob. This is the domain of special providence, where the primary theological narrative of the text operates. This structural separation allows the Edomite family tree to expand horizontally across the screen, where it eventually fades into the background of common history. The narrative lens isolates the central line of Jacob as the sole subject of the remaining text inside the enclosure. Genesis 36 operates as an intentional literary boundary wall built to separate secular history from the sacred narrative. The cataloging of Esau's kings and dukes was the ancient equivalent of closing the file on a completed narrative arc. The worldly promises of territory and nationhood made to Esau and Abraham were recorded and archived here. Because the Edomites are now established outside the covenant narrative, their future belongs to earthly political records. Immediately after chapter 36, the focus narrows back onto Jacob, Joseph, and the descent into Egypt. This time-lapse signifies the absolute finality of this chapter. The biblical narrative will never again dedicate this level of structural focus to Esau's internal affairs. Genesis 36 establishes a geopolitical map for future generations and clears the theological stage for the events to follow. This registry provides the structural gateway for the Israelite epic to unfold without leaving unresolved narrative threats.